The road between Mecca and Taif is not a road. It is a question. 40 miles of open stone and burning silence that strips a man down, slowly and without apology, until what remains is not who he thought he was but who he actually is. Yusuf had spent 38 years building an answer to that question. A shop. A name people recognized. A father he was proud of even when pride was the only currency they shared. By the time he reached the road, all of it was gone. His father had died on a Tuesday. Not with dignity. Not surrounded by soft light and final words. He died the way men die when they have spent their lives giving more than they received, quietly, in a back room, in a body that had simply used itself up. Yusuf had sat beside him for the last 3 days. He had held his hand when the breathing changed. He had been the one to close his eyes. He had washed him and wrapped him and carried him to the ground himself, because that is what a son does. He had not cried at the burial. He told himself it was strength. He understood later it was shock, the numbness of a man who does not yet know that the worst part has not arrived. The worst part arrived 3 days later. 2 men. Neither cruel, exactly. Just precise. Your father owed us 400 dirhams. My father is dead. Yes. The debt is not. In the months that followed, Yusuf learned what debt does to a life. It does not arrive like a flood. It arrives like drought. Gradually. Quietly. One thing at a time, until you look around and realize the landscape you are standing in no longer resembles the one you built. First the savings. Then the shop, 3 generations of cloth and rope, sold to a buyer who knew he had no choice and priced accordingly. The number shrank. It did not disappear. His friends became quiet. Not all at once. Not cruelly. One by one they found reasons to be elsewhere, the specific quiet of men who have decided that proximity to failure is its own kind of risk. He did not blame them. He had done it himself once, to a man whose business had failed. He had told himself he was busy. He had believed it. Now he understood what it felt like from the other side. What remained? A number that was smaller but not zero. A city where every corner held something he used to have. And a road north, to a city where there was work for a man willing to carry things and ask nothing about the nature of what he was carrying. He left before sunrise. There was no one left who needed to know. The first day was manageable. The second, something shifted. The desert began to assert itself, the silence grew heavier, the distances between landmarks felt longer than they looked. His body kept moving, but the part of him that moved it had begun to ask questions. How far still? What if the water runs short? He answered with walking. By the third morning the questions had changed. Who is waiting for you? Who knows you are here if you do not arrive? How long before anyone notices? He had no good answers. He walked anyway. His water ran out at midday on the 3rd day. He had done everything correctly. Measured it. Disciplined himself against the urge to drink more than his ration, even when the heat made that discipline feel like violence. It did not matter. The skin was empty. The sun was directly overhead, that specific cruelty of the desert at noon when shadow disappears entirely and the light comes from everywhere at once, total and inescapable. Yusuf looked in every direction. No caravan. No traveler. No bird crossing the sky. He sat. The ground burned through his robe. He thought about his father. The shop. The 2 precise men. His friends becoming quiet one by one. The number that had followed him from Mecca like a second shadow. I tried, he said. Quietly. The word disappeared into the silence without echo. I tried to pay what I did not borrow. I tried to carry what I did not create. I sold everything and I am still walking and I do not know if I will arrive. His throat was too dry to continue. He had not intended those words as prayer. He was not sure he still knew how. Somewhere in growing into a man who solved his own problems, the habit of speaking to Allah had become the habit of speaking to himself instead. But the words had gone somewhere. He could feel it. Not comfort. Not warmth. Just the faint wordless sense that the silence he was speaking into was not empty. He closed his eyes. The heat pressed down. The shade arrived before he understood it. A degree of difference. Maybe two. Small enough that his mind filed it as imagination. He opened his eyes. The sky was clear. Completely, entirely, mercilessly clear, that deep unbroken blue of desert noon that offers nothing. Except, above him, a cloud. Small. White. Ordinary in shape. The kind a man might glance at and look away from without a second thought. But it was alone in the sky. And it was not moving. Yusuf stared at it. He was a practical man. He understood how clouds worked. They are carried by wind. They drift. They do not pause above specific locations. They do not choose. He stood, unsteady. He took 3 steps north. The cloud moved. He stopped. The cloud stopped. He stood very still, the sound of his own breathing loud in the silence. He took 3 steps east off the road, into open desert. The cloud moved east. He walked back to the road. The cloud returned with him. Something happened in his chest that had no clean name. Not joy, not fear, not relief, though it contained pieces of all 3. The feeling of a man who has been walking alone for a very long time, suddenly understanding that the solitude he believed in completely was not what he thought it was. That the silence he had been speaking into was occupied. That he had been seen. Not recently. Always. He began to walk. The cloud followed, not approximately, not in the general direction of travel, but precisely above him. His personal sky, his shadow when the sun had taken all other shadows away. The heat continued its work on everything around him. The sun did not stop. The temperature did not drop. But he was in shade. And shade, in a desert, at midday, with no water, shade is not a small thing. Shade is the difference. He walked for hours beneath it without speaking. Processing what was happening in a part of himself that did not deal in language. Then, somewhere in that long impossible afternoon, Allah. You see me. The cloud moved above him. You have always seen me. He kept walking. I forgot. I forgot, and I am sorry, and I understand now that forgetting was the only thing I was doing wrong. Nothing else needed to be said. The outskirts of Taif appeared in the late afternoon, first as a change in the air, then as shapes resolving slowly into walls and rooftops and the sound of a living place. Yusuf stopped. He looked up. The cloud was gone. Not dramatically. Not with any signal. It had ceased to be there, the way a lamp goes out when its purpose is complete. He stood at the edge of the city and looked at the place where it had been. Then he walked in. The work was hard, anonymous, indifferent to his history. He carried goods before sunrise and after sunset. He loaded and unloaded. He slept on a mat in a warehouse corner and ate 1 full meal a day and put everything else aside. He counted his coins every Friday night by lamplight. The number grew. Slowly. Painfully. With the particular slowness of accumulation that feels, in early weeks, like mockery. but it grew. On the nights when it felt hopeless, when the distance between what he had and what he owed felt permanent, he returned to that afternoon. To the empty sky and the one cloud and the shade that had no right to exist. Allah had not removed the dead, had not restored the shop or returned the friends or brought his father back. He had given shade. Just enough. And Yusuf began to understand that just enough given precisely when needed, in exactly the right measure, is not a small mercy. It is the shape mercy takes when it knows you better than you know yourself. He returned to Mecca 8 months later. He sat across from the older man at a low table. He placed the coins between them without speaking. The man counted slowly. When he finished, he looked up. "This is the full amount." "Yes." A silence. "You should not have been able to do this. I have seen men with more than you had fail to pay half of this." Yusuf thought about the road, the empty water skin, the burning ground, the words he had spoken into a silence he had not been sure was occupied. The cloud. "I was not alone," he said. The man studied him for a moment, then nodded, as if he understood more than Yusuf had said. That night, Yusuf walked to where the buildings gave way to open desert. He sat in the cooling sand and looked at the sky. Stars arriving one by one as the light faded, the way they always had, the way they always would. Not empty, never empty. He thought about the year. About what had been taken, what had been carried, and what he could see it clearly now, from this side of it had been given. Not always in forms he recognized. Not always in the forms he would have chosen. But given. A father who showed him what obligation looks like. A debt that showed him what he was made of. A road that showed him what he had forgotten. And a cloud. Small. Ordinary. Unremarkable to anyone who might have seen it. Which was no one. Except him. Allah does not always remove the road. He does not always send what you expect. Sometimes he sends a cloud. Small. Quiet. Precisely above you. Just enough shade to keep you moving. This is not a small thing. This is a man being told without words, without drama. You are seen. You have always been seen. Keep walking.